Hello, America. Welcome to your Leo Nation, where we believe in and support the rule of law. And through that, we aim for a civil society, ladies and gentlemen. By the way, today I'm proudly wearing my Betsy Ross flag. Remind me of the founding principles of this country. I love this shirt. It's actually Rush Limbaugh signature there. I love this shirt. By the way, my kid years ago threw some crayons in the dryer with this, of course, and got it stained. I was heartbroken, but anyway, it's still one of my favorites. You know, the reason I reminded everybody listening, really and myself, about a civil society with the opening today is because, as I've said so many times on the show, it's been a while, but I've said it so many times. Look, we're called Your Leo Nation, law enforcement officer, and obviously that conjures up, images of law enforcement professionals, individual officers that are responsible for the rule of law. They certainly enforce the rule, the laws that are in the books. But as I've said so many times, the rule of law does not start with government officials. It does not start with deputies or agents or police officers or state troopers or DAs or judges. The rule of law, a civil society, starts with you and me, the individual citizen of this country. That's where the rule of law must start, or we do not have a civil society. Simple as that. If we don't obey the law, if we don't instill the rule of law with our children, if we do not make abiding by the rule of law a priority, we live in chaos. And government can only do so much. It's as simple as that. And when people undermine the rule of law by really, obviously violating the law, clearly, but I think something even more insidious is when you lie about a crime, when you make up a crime, for so many reasons we can get into maybe in another show. But the point is, if you are, again, aside from not following the law, when you undermine credibility of coworkers, with friends, with general society, with the community in which you live, when you accuse an individual or the community or society at large of committing crimes when they haven't, it's one of the worst things that you can do. And it also indicates that obviously either, a person doing something like this is purely out of their mind, crazy, and or they are so angry, they are so willing to hurt individuals or societies in order to further a political agenda that they would engage in behavior like this. And this is what I want to talk about today. I've talked about it before, but I want to set the stage and go back a little bit in time and talk about some old stories. Like, first of all, let's go back to the, let's just say the granddaddy of them all, and that's Jussie Smollett, or Smollett, as a certain comedian calls him. And going back now, what is it, 5 years, but they 6 years ago, 6.5 years ago, with the claim of the MAGA fellas at 2:00 in the morning in Chicago, whatever it is, 20 below zero, whatever the temperature is, and they tackle him, they put a noose around them, they say this is MAGA country, and blah, 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 blah. And he goes to the police station with the noose around his neck, which is awesome. He doesn't take off the noose. He walks to the cops or whatever, or waits for the cops, whatever it is. And we all know this turned out to be, by the way, on day one, most of us realized it was a hoax. It was an absolute lie. But legally, it turns out that it was proven that he made all this stuff up. Then subsequently, the case is dismissed on other ticky-tack reasons. A horrible agreement that the DA down there entered into later on. But the point is, we all know now that it was a complete hoax, as if we didn't know it on day one. But again, here's a guy in entertainment, in that world. He's so angry, he's so hated, and I would guess still hates Donald Trump, that he would go to these lengths, jeopardize the enormous wealth, success, celebrity that he has, and make up this outlandish story about racism in America, about how bad it is. By the way, a gay black man who's obviously making millions and millions of dollars, incredibly successful, but apparently for every other black person in the country, racism is bad today as it was in 1840 Alabama. It is so despicable. There are not enough words to describe how bad this is, but it's not the only story. There are many stories like this that long ago and before and since I'm going to get into, talking about how bad racism is and, falsifying, conjuring up stories about how bad racism is, and to the point where you actually uh, filing fraudulent police reports. So fast forward here to something more recent. This is in Allentown, Pennsylvania. This is March of this year. This is from what's the publication? I'll find it here. Again, as usual, I try to bring you not conservative publications. Not always, but I make my effort here. But anyway, this is from Allentown, Pennsylvania in March. Allentown City Hall employee charged with false report of noose left on work desk. This is a city employee who, well, let me read the article to you. By the way, you know what? Funny, I just thought about the noose seems to be a common thread, no pun intended, common thread here with a lot of these false claims. And I'm going to go back to another one to remind me of just briefly. But anyway, here we are, March. LaTarsha Brown, 42, of Allentown, is charged with misdemeanor making false reports to law enforcement and misdemeanor tampering with evidence. Beyond thinking they're law enforcement partners with the FBI, Pennsylvania State Police, and the Lehigh County District Attorney's Office, neither city police nor elected officials provided any further comment about the incident. Allentown Mayor Matt Turk also didn't comment about the charges on his Facebook page. There was no attorney information listed Monday afternoon in court records for Brown. She also didn't immediately return a request for comment. Brown, at the time of the incident, worked at the city's Department of Economic and Community Development on the third floor of City Hall. Genesis Ortega, the city's communication director, confirmed to LehighValley.com as of Monday afternoon, again, this is back in March or so, Brown remains employed with the city. She started in August of 2021. Brown also sits on the Allentown School Board of Directors. This is a beauty, ladies and gentlemen. When you're worried about how your kids are being indoctrinated at school, now think about this. I'm going to get into the details, but this woman falsified a report claiming racism against her in her workplace. And now she is responsible for the education of your kids in Allentown, Pennsylvania. It's unclear if she plans to seek re-election. Well, by the way, I'm sure she will. Like so many on the left, I'm sure she's completely shameless. And anybody who would engage in the behavior I'm going to read to you right now, why not run for re-election? The incident unfolded shortly after 7:30 a.m. on January 10th when Brown, who was black, allegedly called city police to report a noose placed on her work desk. I wonder if she actually borrowed the one from Jussie Smollett or somebody else I'll talk about in a minute. Investigators arrived about 15 minutes later to City Hall, 4:30 to whatever, Hamilton, blah, blah. Police said Brown reported arriving to work at 7 a.m. and checking her work-related email about an email she sent the previous day. Video surveillance footage showed her clocking in by 7:11 a.m., court records show. The email sent by Brown on January 9th was addressed to several office members, along with the Human Resources Department, outlining work conditions, police said. Brown allegedly reported to police that while checking her email, she found the noose on her desk, according to the affidavit of probable cause. The court record lays out evidence and witness testimony against a defendant. Brown reported she had to Google it because she did not know the name of the item but recognized it to be, quote, a rope they hang slaves with, unquote, records show. Now remember, she said she Googled this because she didn't know what to call this thing. By the way, previous paragraph read that while checking emails, she looks over, oh my goodness, there's one of those things they used to hang slaves with. The whole story is so preposterous, but it gets better. Brown then picked up the noose by the end, took a photo, and sent the photo to two colleagues in a text message about 7:27 a.m. January 10th. Court records state. Text included crying emojis and identify the item as it looks like a noose, the rope they used to hang slaves, according to court records, quote unquote. Police said no prior texts were sent to the colleagues indicating an issue in the office. Just before 7:40 January 10th, Brown allegedly sent a 6-paragraph email to several people, including immediate supervisors and members of the Human Resources Department. She told investigators that she sent the email after she found the noose, police said. So, look, I worked in public sector for 30 years. I worked in private sector, subsequent to that for 2.5 years. Dealt with HR, dealt with individuals, dealt with command staff, support. Is this really the way that you'd react to something like this? Now, again, we all know it's a hoax. She's been charged. We've already gotten to the point here. But when you think about something like this, when you think about how outlandishly insane this whole claim is, and about how you would actually react, because if this were real, if she were really surprised, shocked by this, you'd probably get the hell out of your chair, walk down the hallway, get on the phone and call somebody right away. But you take time to send a long email about this rope, I'm quoting her, that is used to hang slaves. And by the way, she wrote it in a present form, used to hang slaves, not used to hang slaves in the past. This is her mindset. Let me continue. January 10th interview with police. Brown allegedly stated, "I feel like the office as a whole has an issue with racism." Brown went on to report other incidents in the office she defined as, quote unquote, being associated with racism. Police said she identified several city employees being involved with racist incidents and identified one as possibly being the person who left the noose on her desk, court records state. Again, she gave a name to police in regards to who she thought might have left this noose on her desk. This is sinful. This is evil. This is evil, ladies and gentlemen. And you talk about undermining a civil society. No matter how angry you are about what's happened in this country in the past, the idea that you would implicate a specific individual in such a heinous and nasty offense as leaving a noose on your desk as a black person, again, it's pure evil. Pure evil. I'm sorry that it's only a misdemeanor she can be charged with, which I understand. It should be worse. Allentown Councilwoman Cecilia Gerlach previously told LehighCounty.com, Valley.com, she believed Brown was targeted because she lodged complaints about racism and workplace discrimination with the city's Human Resource Department and the EEO. Now, this is kind of contradictory because apparently it says she had not complained with HR about any racial incidents, but who knows what's going on. But this city councilwoman, she goes out on a limb, not in her mind, of course. I'm sure she's lockstep apparently with this person, with Brown. But she goes out on a limb here and says, "Oh yeah, I think that this happened," and she lodged complaints. Someone put this noose on her desk because Miss Brown lodged complaints about racism. Really, you think that someone in that in city government there in City Hall is racist enough to leave a noose on this person's desk? By the way, after allegedly, per the city councilwoman, that Brown had actually lodged complaints already about racism, and now you're emboldened enough to think you could get away with leaving a noose on her desk. The whole thing stinks to high heaven, not only in a legal sense, but really in a mindset and cultural sense of the people running the city. You have a city councilwoman here backing her up with no effing evidence whatsoever. She's just going to jump to the conclusion, oh, yeah, this must be real because Miss Brown felt that she was discriminated against and lodged complaints with HR. The ludicrous mindset of these people. Asked how she felt about finding the noose on her desk by a city investigator, Brown allegedly replied she could not provide an emotion, and I don't know, quote unquote. Brown, on January 14th, arrived at the city's police station for additional interviews. She allegedly told detectives she barely handled the noose and just flipped it in her hand when she found it. She refused to submit to DNA testing to provide a reason for being against the court's record state. FBI agents later were brought in to the investigation. Agents interviewed Brown on January 15th. She was then asked to provide an agent with her Google search history from 5 days prior, according to the records. There was no record of Brown searching Google in an attempt to identify the object placed on her desk as a noose, as she had previously reported to court records. So, look, we know that she lied, obviously. Several hours after the meeting with the FBI, Brown called an agent and stated she would be searching for a new job, court records stated. Brown then allegedly requested for the investigation to be stopped, stating she would no longer be cooperating with law enforcement. Why? We know the answer. Because now the heat is on. She knows she's been caught and clearly caught in a lie about the Google research, and now she thinks that by finding a new job, saying I want the investigation to stop, now she thinks this is going to stop the trail to her. Too late, lady. Fast forward, she's been indicted for the crimes we talked about earlier in the article. So the news, and just reminded me, of course, you got Jussie Smollett with the noose. You have this employee in Allentown, Pennsylvania with the noose. Remember the fella from one of my favorite sports, NASCAR? Remember that? Remember Bubba Wallace? This was about 5 years ago, 2020. He claimed that there was a noose hanging in his garage in a certain track. I forget the track now. I'm a big NASCAR fan. I forget which track it was, but it's irrelevant. But he claims that this noose was hanging, in his garage at this track. FBI comes out, investigates, and they determined that the noose had been hanging there in that garage since at least the October prior. I think it was in June or July of 20 when this race was happening. He finds the news, or one of his teammates finds it, and of course Bubba Wallace says that it's racism. But the noose is there for months before. And why is that important? Because every race, the garages are randomly assigned to different teams. So there's no way that someone could have put this noose in the garage months and months and months before Bubba Wallace arrives to this particular race, believing that it's going to be in his garage. It's impossible. A little more background. Again, I've been going to NASCAR races since, I think 1974 was my first race I went to, 11 years old at Riverside, California. I've been around NASCAR. I've been all over the country NASCAR races, and I've been, privileged to be down in the pits with some special passes, things like this. These quote unquote nooses, probably not anymore, of course. Now nobody wants to. No. But these are simple rope handles that are in all these garages for years and years and years. They've been there. For the decades that I've been going to races, they've been in all the garages. Again, not anymore. Now I'm sure there's some kind of other device they use to pull down the garage doors or roll up doors. But anyway, when the FBI comes out, determines that this was not true, it didn't happen, blah, 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 where's Bubba Wallace? Where is he with an apology? Where is he with an explanation of, hey, look, I made a mistake. I wish I hadn't jumped to conclusions, so forth. Nowhere. Nothing. He has stayed on the bandwagon as if he's being treated differently because he's black. It is so damn pathetic. It is so damn disgraceful. it's so damn disappointing. He does race relations no good. It's just the opposite, like the other two idiots that I referred to in this podcast. Does nothing good for law enforcement, does nothing good for a civil society, does nothing good for self-responsibility, does nothing good for encouraging young people to focus on what's important, and that is self-responsibility, self-accountability. Does nothing. Creates this mirage of everything that happens to your life is out of your control. That's what it does. It does not help law enforcement to keep you safe. When people like this a-hole and the other a-holes that I've quoted in this podcast are telling people how racist and evil America is, it undermines the ability to have a civil society. If things are as bad as these people want us to believe, they wouldn't have to make up stories about it. Just like when the NAACP told me that moving to Florida as a black man was one of the most dangerous things that I could do because Florida is so racist. NAACP is as worthless as my dad used to say, tits on a bull. Probably more worthless than that. So let me fast forward. I just want to lay that foundation for what's happening today, because of another reason, because of the continued hatred for law enforcement by many people in this country. And that's what it is. It's a hatred for law enforcement. It's a hatred for the rule of law, because the rule of law, as I said, starts with you. And that means self-policing. And there is one faction in this country who do not want you to self-police. They want you to be subservient to government. If you self-police, if you keep yourself in line, if you say, no, I'm responsible for myself, that eliminates the power they have over you. So what is the biggest story now when it comes to feds? And yes, I'm back now on the immigration story. I've been on the last few podcasts, and I may be on it for a few more for a while because it's huge. So the latest thing now is that ICE is just out randomly kidnapping people. Say it all the time. We hear it all the time from elected officials, that they're just randomly in these unmarked vans and they're wearing these masks and we don't know who they are. They could be, racist. Who knows who they are? They're throwing people in vans and whisking them off to wherever. We hear it all the time. So what's the story now? Los Angeles woman federally charged for allegedly making false claim that she was what? Kidnapped by ICE, the DOJ says. By the way, now, this one I can tell you right now. This is from CBS News. I'm not quoting Fox or you pick it, Breitbart, or any number of other conservative outlets. This is from CBS News. By the way, CBS, I think it should stand for can't be substantiated. That's what I think CBS should stand for. But anyway, they just lost a nice lawsuit for someone who sits in the Oval Office for lying to us. But anyway, so this story, this is updated July 17th, so just a few days ago. And I waited on this one on purpose. I saw it when it broke a little while ago, but I wanted to sit on it again, see how things pan out. I don't want to be first. I want to be as accurate and as complete about it as possible. A woman from South Los Angeles has been federally charged for allegedly making false claims that she was kidnapped by immigration officials, the U.S. DOJ says. Uriana Julia Pelaez Calderon, 41, is charged in a federal criminal complaint with conspiracy and making false statements to federal officials. The complaint cites a June 30th news conference held by Calderon's family and attorneys from Movement Legal, where they claimed that 5 days before, Calderon had been kidnapped by quote-unquote masked men at a Jack in the Box restaurant parking lot in downtown LA and taken to the border in San Ysidro. By the way, this attorneys from Movement Legal is the firm. It kind of goes back to this lady in Pennsylvania and Smollett and Bubba Wallace. You would think that probably, I don't know, 6 hours, let's say 24 hours of investigation through maybe asking for the video from Jack in the Box, maybe looking at some text messages or some phone calls. You would think that they would probably come to the conclusion that, God, maybe our client's not being completely forthcoming with this. It just occurred to me, just reading this right now. I'm thinking, and you'll see why. This is a pretty easy case to crack. But they took it on, and here they are. The family also claimed that while there, Calderon was presented to a U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement staffer and given voluntary self-deportation paperwork. When she allegedly refused to sign the paperwork, she was quote unquote punished and sent to a warehouse at an undisclosed location. The complaint also alleges that Calderon's daughter set up a GoFundMe page to help her. Isn't that wonderful? Now, again, maybe daughter was completely in dark about it and believed it was true, but it's kind of an ancillary story. The Justice Department says surveillance video of the Jack in the Box parking lot shows Calderon getting into a sedan. Investigators also point to phone records that they say show she was in communication with her family during the time that she was allegedly in custody. This is what I'm talking about this law firm. They couldn't have figured this out. Maybe they just didn't want to and thought the federal government would write a check. The DOJ adds that on July 3rd, while Calderon was still purportedly missing, federal agents confirmed she was not in immigration custody. The DOJ says agents from Homeland Security Investigations found Calderon 2 days later at a shopping plaza parking lot in Bakersfield. The complaint alleges that Calderon and her family knew that law enforcement officials were searching for her, but failed to come forward. It adds that she fabricated rescue photos that were made to look as if she was abused while in ICE custody and planned to hold a press conference on July 6th to increase donations to the GoFundMe page and obtain other benefits. And now I think at this point, my guess is the daughter knew better, but she was probably still on the plan. This is a quote here. The conduct alleged in today's complaint shows this hoax, kidnapping, was a well-orchestrated conspiracy, unquote, says U.S. Attorney Bill Asaley. The defendant, this quote again, the defendant and all those involved will face the full consequences of their conduct under federal law. You know, I'm going to continue with this, but you know who needs to face consequences as well? The people who, I believe, really brainwashed this person. By the way, this person obviously who had probably the persuasion of mind to engage in illegal behavior anyway. What I'm talking about is when you make these claims, these elected officials who've made these claims about quote unquote ICE kidnapping people, just picking up people randomly off the street. Maybe you won't use the word kidnapping, but picking them randomly, no warrants, no probable cause, no legal authority to do so. When you hear this over and over and over and over, and you are a particular person who might be inclined to engage in nefarious behavior to begin with, maybe this puts you over the edge. Maybe you're saying, gee, I have all this kind of backing anyway out there. People making these claims about how bad law enforcement is, in this case, specifically the federal government. And so I'm just going to go ahead and get in the bandwagon. I would seriously doubt that those messages did not indoctrinate this person to the extent that she went over the line and did what she did. CBS News Los Angeles has reached out to her attorneys at Movement Legal for a comment and is waiting for a response. Calderon is expected to make her first court appearance in the coming weeks in district court in downtown LA. If convicted on all charges, she could face a statutory maximum sentence of 5 years in federal prison for conspiracy and up to 5 years for the false statements charged. Look, as I said earlier, this is what happens when you tell people over and over and over that America is a hateful place, America is racist, America hates the poor person, America hates the minority, America hates the immigrant. These things happen because weak-minded people who are looking for a free ride, who are looking for celebrity, who are looking for to make money in lawsuits, they will be encouraged to do this. You know, I was having a conversation with a friend of mine in the media yesterday, and I won't mention his name. Obviously, I won't mention who he works for. But he's a dear friend of mine. He really is, and he and I are not politically. When we drill down to party lines, we're not in lockstep. We're not on the same page. But I'll tell you what we're on the same page on. Adamantly, we both believe in the rule of law. We both hate stuff like this I just talked about. We both loathe it because it undermines the ability of people to get along. And it undermines the resources in law enforcement. And people think, oh, it's no big deal. When you're chasing down crap like this, and some of these things have dragged out for years. They dragged out for years. Investigation about investigation. You have DAs. You have multiple agencies. It undermines our resources, but I think more insidiously, it undermines the civil society. And finally, it undermines the credibility of actual incidents of racism or racist-based assaults or crimes or hate crimes. It undermines the credibility of those people who have legitimate claims to make. This has to stop, ladies and gentlemen. I don't know when it will, as long as the left keeps telling society that America is a horrible place. I don't know when it is. But what we have to do as a society, as government, is when we find these people that are falsifying police reports, that they are making these false claims, they have to be prosecuted quickly, efficiently, and to the full extent of the law. For your Leo Nation, I'm the Chief Mark Garrett. God bless you. We'll see you next time.